She built a career on control. He built one on chaos. The only thing they agree on? They can't stand each other until they're forced to work side by side, and sparks fly harder than their arguments. Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Noor Malik believed in three things: sharp tailoring, a strong espresso, and crushing the competition before noon. By 9:37 a.m., two of the three were handled. Her outfit was flawless: black trousers, ivory blouse, minimal gold jewelry that whispered class but never screamed it. And the espresso in her travel mug had just the right bite. The third? Well, that was Julian Reyes. And crushing him was a bit more complicated. He wasn't just her competition. He was the competition. Charismatic, too confident by half, and frustratingly good at what he did. They'd been on opposite sides of nearly every major pitch in New York for the past 3 years. And every time she thought she had him, he'd pull some stunt, some slick, last-minute twist in his presentation that had clients eating out of his palm. Noor hated him. Or more accurately, she hated that she couldn't hate him properly. Not when her heart kicked a little harder every time his name came up in meetings. Not when he made her better just by existing. Today, though, she planned to wipe that smug smile off his face. She arrived at Mosaic Creative's office with her usual sense of purpose, offering curt nods to interns and breezing past coworkers who knew better than to make small talk before her first coffee. Her office had floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Midtown that never failed to make her feel like she was winning. She was settling in when her phone buzzed, an unfamiliar number. Curious, she picked up. Noor Malik. Hope you were nice to your intern this morning. Sounded like she aged 10 years in one sentence. She rolled her eyes before his name even registered. Julian. Good morning to you, too. She sighed. Let me guess, you're calling to rub something in? Not yet. Just wanted to wish you luck today. You'll need it. Wow. Chivalry's not dead after all, she said flatly. Tell me, do you rehearse your arrogance, or is it just natural talent? I'd say both, he replied. But hey, don't worry. Even if you lose the Fortin and Bloom pitch, I'll still think you're brilliant. In a tragically misguided kind of way. She didn't bother responding. Just hung up and muttered to herself, asshole. The Fortin and Bloom pitch was at noon, and Noor spent the next 2 hours preparing. Her slides were clean, her numbers were bulletproof, and her messaging strategy was airtight. When she walked into the high-rise boardroom, every head turned. She didn't need flashy gimmicks. She had presence. But then, of course, he walked in. Julian Reyes. Every bit as annoying in person as he was over the phone, and somehow even better looking. Gray blazer over a black turtleneck, sleeves rolled just enough to show off forearms that, frankly, had no business being that attractive in a professional setting. He looked like he'd wandered out of a magazine shoot and into her afternoon. Their eyes met. He winked. Noor clenched her jaw and looked away. They each gave their pitch. Hers was sharp, data-driven, with a narrative arc that made the product shine. His was looser, more emotional. Big imagery. Bigger charm. She hated how well he worked a room. When it ended, the clients politely said they'd be in touch soon. Noor packed her laptop with practiced calm, avoiding Julian's gaze. But he found her anyway, catching up to her outside the elevator. You were good, he said. Sharp as ever. She raised an eyebrow. And yet somehow I know there's a but coming. No but. Just, if we ever worked together instead of against each other, we'd be dangerous. She gave a short laugh. Dangerous isn't the word I'd use. What would you use? Murderous. He smiled like she'd complimented him. So, is that a no to drinks after work? Hard no, she said, stepping into the elevator. But thanks for the ego boost. As the doors closed, she allowed herself a tiny smirk. Let him charm his way through boardrooms. Let him try to unsettle her. Noor Malik wasn't just playing to win. She was playing for domination. And if Julian Reyes wanted a war, she was ready. Rain came down in a lazy drizzle the next morning, enough to make the sidewalks slick and the air sticky. Noor Malik tucked her umbrella under one arm as she pushed open the door to her favorite corner coffee shop. A quiet little place 2 blocks from the office, with actual ceramic mugs and zero tolerance for pumpkin spice. It was her pre-work ritual. 10 minutes of silence, 1 espresso, no small talk. No distractions, which made it deeply unfair when the bell above the door jingled and the distraction walked in. Julian Reyes. Of course. He didn't notice her at first. He was on his phone, laughing quietly at something, probably texting a woman named Zoe or Tessa, or another name that belonged in a fragrance ad. He looked infuriatingly comfortable, slightly damp hair, navy peacoat, that same energy that said I make everything look easy, don't I? Noor considered slipping out before he saw her. Then again, this was her coffee shop. She'd discovered it. She'd kept it alive during the darkest days of the pandemic, tipping double when no one else could. He didn't get to ruin this, too. So she turned toward the counter, nodded to the barista, and said, "Double espresso." "For here." And just as she took a step forward, Julian turned and collided into her. Cold brew sloshed from his cup, arcing through the air like it had been directed by a vengeful god, and landed squarely across the front of Noor's white blouse. There was a sharp silence. Then his voice. "Shit." Noor stared down at her ruined shirt. "Wow," she said calmly. "That feels symbolic." Julian reached for a stack of napkins. "I wasn't looking." "No kidding." He offered a wad of paper towels. She took them, dabbing at her blouse without looking up. The ice had already started to melt, soaking through the fabric. "You know," he said, "some people pay good money for coffee-infused beauty treatments. I will end you." He held up his hands. "Just trying to help. You've done enough." Her tone was acid. Julian, annoyingly, just smiled. "Let me buy you another shirt," he offered. "What are you going to do? Carry spare blouses in your briefcase?" "No, but I can Google dry cleaner like a gentleman." "I'm late," she snapped, grabbing her espresso as it arrived and turning toward the door. "Stay out of my way, Reyes." "See you at the merger meeting," he called after her. She stopped cold, turned. "What merger meeting?" His smile widened. "Check your email." Back at her desk, blouse now a damp shade of beige, Noor clicked into her inbox and immediately saw the subject line. Mosaic and Northbridge integration kickoff. She opened the email with slow, dawning horror. It was real. Mosaic Creative and Northbridge were officially merging. Effective immediately, all senior creative staff were being assigned to joint project teams. Her name was listed right at the top, next to his. Julian Reyes. She let out a long, level exhale. This couldn't be happening. She had spent 3 years building her reputation, playing the long game, working 10 times harder to be taken seriously in an industry that still thought young, smart, and brown was a personality type. And now she was being forced to partner with the one person who could throw off her entire game. Noor closed her laptop, stared out at the gray skyline. This was going to be a disaster. Or worse, a distraction. The conference room smelled like fresh paint and the faint trace of tension. A glass wall divided the space, like it couldn't quite commit to openness. Noor Malik sat on one side of the table, her legs crossed and expression unreadable, while Julian Reyes slouched 2 chairs away, spinning a pen between his fingers like he was waiting for class to start. On the screen at the front of the room, bold letters read, "Joint Vision. Unified Strategy. One Voice." Noor resisted the urge to gag. Across from her, their mutual boss, now co-boss, technically, Monica, beamed as if this were a wedding reception, and Noor had just agreed to marry Julian for love and quarterly growth. "I know this is a big shift," Monica was saying, "but this merger is about combining our strengths. Noor, you bring precision, discipline, and strategy. Julian brings flair, emotional insight, and jazz hands," Noor muttered under her breath. Julian glanced at her, lips twitching. "And we believe pairing you two for the Sierra Ecotech campaign is the perfect opportunity to set the tone for the new brand," Monica finished. Noor sat straighter. I wasn't aware we were setting the tone. I thought we were just launching an environmental tech brand, which will now be seen by the entire board, Monica added brightly. They want a presentation that's bold, unforgettable. Julian finally spoke. That's my specialty. Noor turned her head just slightly. And subtlety's mine. Maybe we'll balance each other out. He gave her that infuriating smile. Looking forward to it, partner. After the meeting, they were assigned a temporary shared office, a bright corner space with one large desk and 2 chairs, clearly arranged for cooperation and synergy. It felt like a punishment. Noor claimed the left side, plugged in her laptop, and opened her project notes without a word. Julian leaned against the edge of the desk, sipping something that smelled like vanilla and poor decisions. Okay, he said. Let's make a deal. She didn't look up. I don't make deals with men who spill coffee on me and hijack my workplace. Technically, the merger hijacked it. She raised an eyebrow. And the coffee? Divine intervention, he said with a shrug. But seriously, we need to find a rhythm. If we're going to lead this campaign together, we can't spend every meeting trying to one-up each other. You say that like you're not already planning to pitch something with flashing lights and a hashtag, she said dryly. Julian grinned. Guilty. But only if it works. She sighed, finally meeting his gaze. Let's be clear. I don't trust you. You're reckless, you improvise too much, and you talk like every conversation is a first date. I could say the same, he replied, tilting his head. Except you rehearse everything like you're defending a dissertation. You don't listen to instinct, and you'd rather die than admit when you're wrong. She blinked. I mean that lovingly, he added. She blinked again, then annoyingly laughed. Just once. It escaped before she could catch it, and his smile deepened like he'd won something. Noor immediately stood and walked to the whiteboard to reclaim her focus. Okay, she said briskly. We split the project in 2. I'll handle brand positioning, market analysis, and strategy, which leaves me with creative direction, messaging, and visuals. Exactly. We'll compare notes in a week, merge everything into a single pitch deck, and present it to the board. Julian leaned back in his chair, stretching. No crossovers? Not unless necessary. He studied her for a moment. You really don't like sharing control, do you? Noor paused with the marker in hand. I've had to fight too hard for it to give it up easily. There was no snark in her tone. No ice. Just truth. Julian didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then quietly, fair. The room felt heavier suddenly, like something real had passed between them, something neither of them wanted to name. She turned back to the board, clearing her throat. Let's get to work. He nodded, and for the first time since they met, they did. Together. 3 days into the project, Malik found herself doing something she hadn't done since business school. She doubted herself. It crept in around the edges, subtle, persistent. Julian's creative drafts were annoyingly good. Too good. While she had meticulously mapped out timelines and customer profiles with her usual precision, he had returned from a lunch break with an entire campaign concept scribbled across napkins. And it worked. Damn it, it worked. People want to feel empowered, not just responsible, he said during their brainstorming session that afternoon, pacing the office barefoot for some inexplicable reason. Ecotech shouldn't sound like homework. It should sound like the future. Noor looked up from her laptop, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. You're saying we ditch the sustainability angle? No. I'm saying we make sustainability sexy. She blinked. You want to seduce the planet? Julian grinned. If that's what it takes. He tossed one of the napkins onto the table, and she couldn't help but scan it. A minimalist logo concept. Clean. Elegant. Clever. Damn him. She leaned back, folding her arms. Okay, she said. I hate how much I like that. Julian mock gasped. Did Malik just compliment me? Don't let it go to your head, she replied, but there was no edge to it. Not anymore. There was something shifting between them, like the temperature in the room had gone up a few degrees. Their arguments were fewer now. Still sharp, still sparky, but edged less with hostility and more with something else. something she didn't want to name. She watched as he leaned against the desk, tapping the cap of his marker against his palm. He was deep in thought, unusually quiet. "Julian," she said suddenly, "can I ask you something? Is this going to be a trap?" "Maybe." He smiled. "Shoot." She hesitated. "How do you do it?" He looked up. "Do what?" "Walk into a room like it already belongs to you." Julian studied her for a beat too long. "Ah," he said softly. "That's not confidence. That's survival." She frowned. "My dad was a high school teacher," he continued, voice low. "My mom cleaned houses. When I started in this industry, I was the kid who didn't belong. Everyone else had family connections, Ivy League degrees. I had community college and a borrowed suit. So I faked it, walked in like I owned the room. Eventually, the room started to believe me." Noor looked at him differently then. Something she hadn't let herself consider before. He wasn't just a flirt and a big idea machine. He'd earned his space here. "Why'd you ask?" he said after a moment. She shrugged. "You make it look effortless. I've had to fight tooth and nail to be taken seriously. One mistake in. You think they'll write you off," he finished quietly. She nodded. He didn't smile this time. "They might." She looked at him, startled by the honesty. "But they'll never forget you," he added. The silence that followed was thick, charged with something new. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Or something neither of them was ready to say aloud. And then, of course, the moment shattered. "Anyway," Julian said, reaching for his laptop. "Before this gets too emotionally revealing, I should warn you. I added a pun to the campaign's slogan." Noor groaned. "God, why?" "Because I hate you. Obviously." She threw a pen at him. It bounced off his shoulder and landed on the floor, and they both laughed. It was the first time she realized she enjoyed working with him. Not in spite of their history, but maybe strangely because of it. By the time Thursday rolled around, the office had gone quiet. It was after 9 p.m., and only the cleaning crew remained, buzzing vacuums in the distance, faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Noor sat at the long shared table, surrounded by scribbled notes and glowing screens, the campaign deck slowly taking shape in front of her. Julian had left hours ago, or so she thought, until the door creaked open, and there he was, hoodie, sneakers, takeout bag in hand. She looked up from her screen, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I had a feeling you'd still be here," he said, shrugging. "Also, I left my headphones. But mostly the first thing." He walked over and set the food down beside her without asking. "Pad Thai," he said. "Extra lime. I remembered you always hoard the lime wedges." Noor blinked. "You remembered my food order? You're very specific." It stuck. She hesitated, then picked up a container. "Thanks." They sat in silence for a few minutes, slurping noodles side by side like two people who'd forgotten they were supposed to be enemies. It was easy, comfortable even. The silence didn't feel competitive anymore. It felt companionable. Julian broke it first. "You know what's weird?" Noor gave him a look. "You're going to say something weird, aren't you?" "Probably. But seriously, this whole thing. Us. Working together. It's not what I expected." She raised an eyebrow. "Better or worse?" "Infinitely better," he said without hesitation. "Which is very unsettling." She laughed under her breath. "You're so dramatic." "No, I'm serious. I used to think you hated me. I did hate you. And now?" She didn't answer, just twirled her noodles. Julian leaned back in his chair, watching her. "You're not what I expected, either." Noor swallowed. "Let me guess. You thought I was some cold, corporate dragon who eats interns for breakfast." "No. I thought you were brilliant, terrifying, and completely out of my league." She looked up, startled. "You what?" He shrugged. "I mean, you kind of are. But I like that." The air between them shifted again, the same way it had earlier in the week. Something dense and unsaid filling the space between their chairs. Noor felt it settle in her chest like a spark on dry kindling. "You know," he added, eyes still on hers, "it's exhausting pretending not to like you." Her breath caught just a little. "Is that what we've been doing?" she asked. "Feels like it." They stared at each other for a long moment. And then softly she said, "Yeah, it does." Julian didn't move closer. He didn't lean in or try to kiss her. He just sat there, as if waiting for her to decide whether or not she wanted the space between them to disappear. She didn't know what she wanted. Not yet. But when they left the office that night, side by side, takeout containers in hand, it felt less like a truce and more like something brand new. Something fragile, tentative, real. And for the first time in a long time, Noor didn't mind not being in control. The launch pitch was 2 days away, and the office felt like a pressure cooker. Noor was used to working under deadlines. She thrived under pressure, even enjoyed the rush. But this was different. This was Julian. This was complicated. They'd been in sync all week, sharing edits, riffing on concepts, finishing each other's thoughts without even trying. At some point, Noor stopped pretending she didn't enjoy the late nights, or the inside jokes scrawled in the margins of his design drafts. She even started looking forward to his 2 p.m. snack breaks, when he'd show up at her desk with something bizarre from the downstairs deli. Cinnamon pretzels, beet chips, a pickle in a bag, and somehow convince her to try it. Worse, she started missing him when he wasn't there. And that scared the hell out of her. Friday night, the office hosted a small industry mixer in their lounge space. An excuse to network, show off the new joint branding, and pretend everyone wasn't constantly exhausted. Noor came straight from a client call, still half in work mode, dressed in a deep navy jumpsuit and heels sharp enough to kill. Julian was already there when she arrived, drink in hand, leaning against the bar with casual charm and a laugh that caught her attention before she even saw him. He looked good. Too good. Dark green shirt, sleeves rolled up, collar open just enough to make her heart stutter. He turned as if sensing her stare, and smiled when he saw her. "Wow," he said, offering her a glass of something fizzy. "You clean up okay." She arched a brow. "You're lucky I'm holding a drink." They mingled, made polite conversation with clients, even tag-teamed a pitch for an on-the-fence brand manager, like they'd been doing it for years. It was easy, fluid, and a little too fun. After a while, Noor found herself alone on the rooftop, the city glittering below, her breath visible in the crisp evening air. She didn't hear him approach, just felt the warmth of his presence next to her, the quiet way he always arrived when her defenses started to fray. "Want me to disappear?" Julian asked. "No," she said softly. "Not tonight." He didn't respond, just stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, both of them looking out at the lights. "Why does this feel like something?" she whispered. "It shouldn't. We were rivals." "We were. Enemies," he finished. She nodded. "You want to hear something stupid?" he said. "Even when I was trying to beat you at everything, part of me always liked you." She turned to him. "Not in a nice way," he added quickly. "In a you infuriate me, but I respect the hell out of you kind of way. You make things harder. And better. All at once." Noor let out a quiet breath. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Let someone in. Let this be real." Julian looked at her then, really looked at her. "You don't have to know. You just have to try." She didn't say anything. So he stepped closer, slowly, carefully, like he was giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, tentative at first. Then deeper. She tasted mint, citrus, something warm. His hand slid to her waist, grounding her, steady. When they finally broke apart, neither of them said a word. There was no need. But as they walked back inside, fingers brushing, hearts pounding, Noor couldn't stop thinking about what came next. Because falling into something was easy. But staying, that took courage. And she wasn't sure she was ready. Noor didn't sleep the night after the rooftop. She lay awake in her apartment, staring at the ceiling while the city moved outside her window. Honking horns, distant sirens, the occasional blast of laughter from the sidewalk below. But all she could hear was the echo of Julian's voice in her head. "You don't have to know. You just have to try." He'd meant it. That terrified her more than if he hadn't. Because Noor didn't try. She succeeded. She planned, calculated, delivered. Emotions didn't get to take the lead. They got filed, processed, and if necessary, ignored. And yet, here she was, unable to stop thinking about the way Julian had looked at her. Like she was worth the risk. Like he'd already jumped. She hadn't. By Monday morning, Noor had made her decision. She arrived at the office before anyone else, fired up her laptop, and started redrafting the campaign deck without Julian's edits. She told herself it was about consistency, about control, about presenting something that couldn't be picked apart by an executive board. But it was about fear. She ignored his text that morning. "Julian, want to run through the final pitch together? Your place or mine?" "Eyes." She left it on read. An hour later, he walked into the office and stopped cold when he saw the screen. "You changed the deck?" he asked, blinking. "I tightened the messaging. Reframed the hook. Nothing major." "Noor, what the hell? You cut half my content." "I streamlined it," she said evenly. It needed cohesion. He stared at her, and this time there was no easy grin. No flirty sarcasm. Just hurt. "Is this about the pitch?" he asked quietly. "Or about us?" "There is no us," she said. The silence was immediate. And heavy. Julian took a step back, crossing his arms. "Right. Okay." She didn't look at him. Couldn't. "Forget it," he said, voice clipped. "You want to control the narrative? Fine. It's all yours." He left before she could say anything else. Not that she had the words anyway. That night, she sat in her apartment surrounded by empty takeout containers and a deck that was technically perfect. Every slide polished. Every transition seamless. And yet it felt hollow. Lifeless. She had done everything right. And somehow she still felt wrong. Her phone buzzed. A message from her sister. "Layla, how's the campaign going?" Also, Julian looked hot in that group pic. Eyes spill. Noor stared at the screen, then typed out. "We kissed." I pushed him away. "I think I screwed it all up." The response came instantly. "Layla, you're allowed to be scared. But don't pretend that's the same as being right." That hit like a punch. Noor sat with it, heart racing, for a long time. Then she grabbed her coat and keys. She knew exactly where to find him. He was at the coffee shop. Their coffee shop. The one where he'd ruined her blouse and, apparently, every emotional wall she'd ever built. He was alone, sipping something dark, reading through notes on a tablet. When he saw her, he didn't smile. She sat across from him anyway. "I'm sorry," she said. "Quiet. Real." Julian raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For lying. For pushing you away. For rewriting the whole pitch like you didn't matter." A pause. Then she added, "You do matter. Way more than I was ready for." He leaned back, studying her. "What changed?" "I realized I've spent my whole life being afraid of failure. And suddenly, you felt like something I couldn't control. So I panicked." Another silence. Then slowly he said, "You don't have to control me, Noor. You just have to show up." "I want to," she whispered. Julian reached across the table and took her hand, warm, steady. "Then start now." 2 weeks later, the boardroom was packed. Noor adjusted her blazer, smoothed her notes, and forced herself to breathe. It wasn't nerves exactly. It was anticipation. She looked to her left, where Julian stood, hands in his pockets, somehow both casual and completely dialed in. Their eyes met. He winked. This time she smiled back. The Sierra Ecotech launch was about more than just a pitch now. It was the product of two people finally learning how to trust each other, how to blend fire with instinct, precision with heart. They presented as a team, seamless, balanced, electric. Noor led with sharp strategy and market data. Julian followed with bold visuals and story-driven branding. They moved in rhythm, one building on the other. When the last slide faded out and the room burst into applause, Noor looked at Julian and knew. This was what it felt like to win without needing to do it alone. Afterward, the celebration spilled into a rooftop bar. There were toasts, high fives, one mildly chaotic team photo, and someone trying to climb a fire escape for the aesthetic. Noor stood at the edge of the crowd, sipping a drink, the city lights blazing around her. Julian found her there, 2 glasses in hand. He passed her one. To rivals, he said. To lovers, she replied. They clinked glasses, and the moment hung between them, quiet, golden, safe. Julian leaned against the railing beside her. So, we crushed the launch. The agencies aren't imploding. You're smiling in public. Should we tell people we're dating or just keep making them wildly uncomfortable at work? Noor laughed. Let's keep them guessing. At least for another week. He grinned. God, I like you. I know. She kissed him, soft and sure, because this time there was no fear left. No second-guessing. Just the steady rhythm of something worth keeping. 3 months later, Noor and Julian sat in the new joint office space, now redesigned and rebranded under the name H+M Collective. A nod to the merger and, quietly, a joke about their last names being next to each other on the email roster. They were co-leading a new campaign. Equal partners. Still debating over font sizes. Still bickering over taglines. Still driving each other crazy. But also, still in love. And this time, there was no pretending.